My name is Kennedy, and I'm 36 years old. For as long as I can remember, I've lived in the shadow of my older sister, Alexandra, who's 4 years older and never missed a chance to turn my life into a competition I never signed up for. Even in elementary school, Alexandra was praised as sharp and the natural heir of the family, while I was labeled reserved, a polite way of saying overlooked. At home, she always got the bigger slice of cake from mom, the TV remote from dad, and was the only one allowed to lock her bedroom door. Every decision revolved around her preferences. I used to think things would change when we got older. They didn't. Alexandra's manipulation just became more sophisticated with age. In high school, I had my first boyfriend, Ben. He was the first to take me to the movies, the first to hold my hand in the schoolyard. A week after Alexandra found out, she suddenly began bumping into Ben at the library. Then it was helping him with math, then working on a group project together. 2 weeks later, they were officially dating, like I had never existed. When I cried, Mom just said, "Well, if you didn't hold on tight enough, someone else will." Couldn't understand how a sister, my own flesh and blood, could be so cruel. Then came my college graduation. Alexandra showed up, of course, but made sure to insert herself into every conversation to talk about her new position at a major finance firm in New York. When I received my honors, she leaned over to Mom and muttered, "Just a decent GPA, nothing special." I didn't react. I never did. After every incident, Alexandra would come to me with watery eyes and say, "I'm sorry, I didn't know that hurt you." She always had an excuse. "I was under stress. I didn't mean to. I just want the best for you." And like a fool, I forgave her. I always forgave her. I didn't want to lose my sister. I used to dream of weekend coffee dates, warm holiday hugs, and late-night phone calls like other sisters have. But the more hope I held on to, the more I got met with coldness, jealousy, and subtle sabotage. Then she met Max, now her husband, and I thought maybe finally her life had found its own path. He was kind, calm, and didn't seem swept up in her usual theatrics. I was genuinely happy for them. I even stood as her maid of honor at the wedding. I wrote her a heartfelt speech and never once brought up our painful past. I truly believed Alexandra had changed. For a while after that, our relationship was tolerable. Not close, but civil. I told myself, at least now she has a husband, she'll stop fixating on me. I was naive. Because once Alexandra saw me start to build a life of my own, a stable job, my own apartment, a circle of close friends, that old competition flared up again. But this time, it wasn't snide remarks or dismissive glances. This time it was something darker. Something that made me wonder, if even family could betray you like this, where do you draw the line to protect yourself? The invitation was printed on heavy silk paper, edged in gold foil with embossed silver letters, celebrating 10 years of Alexandra and Max, Saturday evening at Rosemont Hall. I nearly tossed it in the trash, but like every other time, I went. Some part of me still clung to the impossible hope that maybe this time things would be different. Rosemont Hall was the kind of place meant for people who wanted everyone to know just how wealthy they were. High ceilings, French crystal chandeliers, and servers in tuxedos floating like ghosts beneath candlelight. I arrived on time, wearing a simple black dress I'd had to reserve 2 weeks in advance, because I knew Alexandra. She never missed a chance to critique every detail, from your hemline to your heel height. She greeted me on Max's arm, wearing a crimson silk gown that hugged her body, a result of extreme dieting and, I guessed, no fewer than 3 beauty treatments a month. "Oh, you made it," Alexandra said, her lips curved in a smile that never reached her eyes. "The dress looks comfortable. Macy's?" I ignored the jab. "Happy 10-year anniversary," I said, turning my attention to Max. "Thanks, Kennedy," Max said warmly. He was still the same, polite, patient, and maybe the only person who ever made me believe Alexandra had a shot at being someone better. But even Max looked different that night. Tired, I thought. Drained. After a brief greeting, Alexandra was swept away for photos with her old college friends. Max handed me a glass of white wine, leaning in with a quiet comment. You and your sister. Some things never change, huh? I gave a small laugh, though nothing felt funny. You doing okay? Okay is a flexible term, he said, glancing around. Want to take a quick walk? I need air. We stepped into the side corridor behind the ballroom, quieter, filled with the faint scent of lavender from potted plants lining the walls. Max sat on a marble bench, stretched his arms, and sighed. She planned tonight for 3 months, he began. Every detail had to be flawless, but what? We're not the people in our wedding photo anymore. She controls everything, even how I feel. I stayed silent. I wasn't sure what made him open up to me. Especially tonight, of all nights, what was supposed to be their celebration of love. She doesn't trust anyone, Kennedy, Max said softly. Not even me. Have you tried therapy together? 3 times. Every time, she charmed the therapist, then quit when they eventually suggested she might be part of the issue. He let out a bitter laugh. In Alexandra's world, anyone who doesn't obey is a traitor. I was about to reply when Alexandra appeared at the end of the corridor. She spotted us, Max sitting, me standing, a little too close under dim lighting, and froze. Looks like you two are having quite the chat, she said, still smiling, but her eyes were sharp. We're just talking, I answered evenly. Of course, Kennedy always has great timing. Max stood up and interjected, we just needed a break from the noise. You know how I hate crowds. But you don't mind one-on-one time with my sister? Alexandra snapped, then didn't wait for an answer. The guests are looking for you. Let's go. She pulled Max away, leaving me standing there with nothing but a lukewarm glass of wine and the growing weight in my chest. Back in the ballroom, I tried to blend in, but Alexandra's gaze burned from across the room like a slow, deliberate fire. I'd crossed an invisible line, even if I didn't know what it was yet. Dinner began. I was seated at table 12 with 3 of Max's work colleagues and a distant cousin couple. Alexandra didn't say a word, but the look she gave me when I poured my second glass of wine felt like a silent warning. And then I started to feel something. At that moment, I had no idea that tonight would change everything. That behind the red silk gown, behind the polished speeches and carefully posed smiles, a storm had already begun. One I was about to be dragged into. I stepped away from the table to fix my lipstick, not because I needed to, but because I needed to escape the suffocating weight pressing in on me. Alexandra's 10-year anniversary party was orchestrated down to the last detail, but the one thing she didn't plan for was me. Or the way Max had said, she's not the woman I once loved. The upstairs restroom was eerily quiet. I took a deep breath, washed my hands, tried to steady myself. But as I stepped back toward the ballroom, I froze. From a distance, I saw Alexandra standing by my table. Her back was to me, but the large wall mirror reflected her movements perfectly. From her purse, she pulled out a small object, twisted the top, and quickly emptied something into my champagne glass. The motion was smooth, practiced, as if she'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror. I stood paralyzed, my blood roaring in my ears, skin gone cold. When she stepped back, her eyes met my reflection in the mirror. But Alexandra didn't see me. She turned, grabbed another glass, and slipped back into the crowd with her usual artificial smile. I walked calmly to the table, sat down as if nothing had happened. The champagne glass was refilled, sitting next to a chocolate-dipped strawberry. On the napkin, a message in gold ink read, "To the best little sister, A." I lifted the glass, tilted it under the light, a faint, odd fizz. Dusty specks along the rim, nearly invisible unless you looked closely. I didn't drink. I also didn't leave. That would prove nothing, and I needed to know exactly what Alexandra had planned for me. I went looking for Max. He was near the dessert table, chatting with an old friend. I approached with a calm smile. "We haven't properly toasted yet," I said. You're right, but I think I've had enough already. What about champagne?" I held up the glass, giving him no time to reconsider. "Just a sip for 10 years. He hesitated, then shrugged. All right, but you first. I laughed softly. That's outdated. You go first. Smoothly, I swapped his old wine glass with the champagne. The switch was seamless, even Max didn't notice. We clinked glasses, I only touched mine to my lips. Max took a full sip. I avoided looking across the room, but I could feel Alexandra's gaze piercing through the crowd. Her smile faltered the second she saw me put the glass down. Clear-eyed, steady. How is it? I asked Max. Okay, a bit bitter, he said, frowning. Doesn't taste like the usual. 15 minutes later, Max started acting strange. He laughed louder, rambled to strangers, and when the music started, he jumped onto the dance floor like it was a college frat party. I stood at the edge of the room, heart icy. Alexandra stared at him, grip tightening around her glass, face pale. When Max started stumbling, I heard her hiss a curse. She rushed onto the dance floor, grabbed his arm. He pulled away, laughing. Let go, Alex. This is the most fun I've had all year. People turned. A group of women murmured, concerned. Alexandra grabbed his arm again, this time snapping under her breath. What the hell are you doing? Max replied, voice slurred. Living. Like a normal person. Then he collapsed, right into the wedding cake table. The 3-tier cake toppled. Guests screamed. Staff ran in. Alexandra fell to her knees beside him, panicked. I calmly walked over and looked down at her. Guess that toast didn't go down well, I said lightly. Alexandra looked up, eyes bloodshot, whispering through clenched teeth. What did you do? Nothing, I said. I just didn't drink what was meant for me. She understood instantly, and for the first time in her life, Alexandra had nothing to say. Max couldn't get up. He lay flat on the marble floor, surrounded by frosting and ruined cake, eyes wide open, lips moving with words no one could make out. The music stopped. A spoon dropped. A woman gasped, "Oh my God, is he having a stroke?" Alexandra nearly lost it. She knelt beside Max, shaking his shoulders while trying to smile at the growing circle of silent, retreating guests. Sweetheart, it's just the alcohol, right? Get up, come on. They're watching. Max groaned, sat up shakily, face flushed, hair streaked with frosting. Please, I need water. My head. It won't stop spinning, he stammered. A server rushed over with a glass. Max reached for it, but his hands trembled so violently the water spilled all over his shirt. I stood just a few feet away, never taking my eyes off Alexandra. She was panicking. Not the kind of panic about embarrassment, but the kind that came from fear of being found out. Her gaze flicked toward me, then darted away. She knew. And I knew she knew. A voice spoke from behind me. We should call an ambulance, a relative, from Max's side of the family. I nodded immediately. Call now, this could be a drug reaction or something toxic in the drink. Alexandra snapped her head around, voice sharp. Are you implying something, Kennedy? Not implying anything, but he didn't drink much, and that last glass, you poured it. The room went quiet. Guests exchanged glances. Some began edging toward the exits. Don't accuse me like that, Alexandra screamed. I just wanted this party to go smoothly. By spiking your sister's drink, I said, loud and clear. Gasps spread across the room. Max looked up, dazed, turning toward me. Drugs? What drugs? He slurred. That's for the doctors to say, I replied, staring directly at Alexandra. Unless you'd like to confess now. No one spoke as hotel staff pushed through the doors, announcing the ambulance had arrived. 2 paramedics in blue uniforms rushed in with a stretcher and medical gear. They surrounded Max, checking his blood pressure, pupils, and response time. Did he consume anything unusual? A nurse asked. I didn't hesitate. Champagne, but I suspect it was laced with a sedative. The nurse looked up. Do you know what kind? I stayed silent. My eyes locked on Alexandra. Her face went pale. Hands trembling, she gripped the edge of a table to steady herself. 1 second. 2. Then she mumbled. Ativan. Just 1 dose. I just wanted him to calm down. You gave your husband benzodiazepine during a champagne toast? One of the medics repeated, voice cold. Not for him, I interrupted. She meant to give it to me. Max croaked, what? The nurse responded urgently. We need to transport him now. That combination can cause respiratory failure. He needs monitoring. Shock rippled through the crowd. No more smiles, no more raised glasses. Only glittering lights falling on a party floor, now frozen, while the truth spilled out, one drop at a time. Max was lifted onto the stretcher. As they prepared to wheel him out, he reached for my hand. Thank you, he said, looking straight at me, for seeing everything. I squeezed his hand gently, then stepped aside as the medics exited the hall. As the doors closed behind them, Alexandra turned to me. Her eyes were sunken, glassy with tears, but her voice was still sharp as steel. You ruined my life. I looked straight at her. No, Alexandra, you did that yourself. I just refused to go down with you. And I walked away, and I didn't look back. Memorial Hospital was less than a 15-minute drive from Rosemont Hall, yet that night, the distance felt like a suspended sentence hanging over all of us. I arrived just minutes after the ambulance, alongside my parents, who had shown up just in time to see everything unravel. My mother stayed silent the entire walk down the corridor, and my father said only one thing. We need to hear the truth from both sides. But his eyes betrayed any calm he tried to keep. Max was getting fluids through an IV, lying in the ER observation unit. He looked pale, but more alert than before. A nurse stopped us at the door, allowing only immediate family inside. Alexandra stepped forward first, but as soon as her hand touched the door, the nurse said quietly, "Placed her seat, Kennedy." The hallway fell completely silent. Alexandra whipped around to glare at me, eyes furious, but no longer in control. I walked past her without a word. The door closed behind me like a curtain between past and present. Max looked up at me, his voice hoarse but clear. Are you okay? I should be asking you that. I never thought tonight would end this way, he said, pressing his lips together. But maybe it should have ended a long time ago. We talked for about 10 minutes. I told him everything, from seeing Alexandra put something in the glass to switching it and watching what followed. Max stayed quiet through it all, only nodding now and then. I'm not surprised, he finally said, just disappointed I didn't walk away sooner. A few moments later, a nurse knocked on the door. The police are here. They need statements. In a hospital consultation room, an officer jotted down notes as Max recalled everything, from how he felt after drinking the champagne to Alexandra's strange behavior during the party. When it came to the most crucial part, he turned to me. She didn't mean to drug me. The target was Kennedy. The officer turned my way. Can you confirm that? I saw her put something into my champagne glass through the mirror. Because I was suspicious, I switched it with Max. Do you know exactly what it was? Alexandra said it in front of at least 6 people. It was Ativan. He scribbled that down quickly, then looked at both of us. Even while we're still waiting for the blood work, if that's true and the victim was unaware, this could qualify as intentional poisoning. And Max inhaled deeply and shut his eyes for a few seconds. I don't want to press charges. I just want all of this to be over. The officer noted that and nodded. If no charges are filed by the victim, we may still open an investigation if there are signs of health risks or potential for repeat behavior. As he left, I saw Alexandra curled up on a bench down the hallway, fingers clenched so tight it looked painful. When my father approached and asked, "Is it true?" she didn't look up, only murmured, "I just wanted to make her lose control just a little so people could see she's not perfect." I stood frozen, staring. You were that jealous you risked someone's safety. Alexandra looked up, eyes bloodshot. You always made me feel like the extra in my own family, even when you weren't trying. Max stopped seeing me the same way. But you, just being in the room, he turned back into who he used to be. I could barely believe what I was hearing. You really thought I stole him? I never tried to ruin anything you had. But you've never stopped trying to ruin me. My father spoke low, voice cracking. This ends now. To Alexandra didn't answer, but she didn't resist either, as my mother gently pulled her toward administration. She had to sign a release allowing the hospital to report the medication to the authorities. As for Max and me, we just looked at each other, drained, but lighter. I'm moving out next week, Max said later when I returned to his room, and I'll be hiring my own attorney. Are you sure? There's no other choice. This isn't a marriage anymore, it's a battlefield. I nodded. 1 week after that fateful night, my father called, his voice cold as steel, but laced with exhaustion. Sunday, 2 p.m., at the house. No exceptions. He wasn't joking. The last time he summoned the whole family like this was when Grandma died. This time felt just as heavy. But the one who died wasn't a family member. It was the trust between the ones still living. When I stepped into the childhood home in suburban Greenville, my mother was setting down a tray of tea. Alexandra was already there, curled up at the dining table. No makeup, no glamorous outfit, just an oversized gray t-shirt, jeans, and circles under her eyes that couldn't be hidden. Dad sat at the head of the table, fingers intertwined, eyes sharp with the weight of 3 decades as a psychology professor. I don't know where to begin, he said, but this can't be brushed aside like the small fractures of the past. No one said a word. My mother placed the teapot down and took the seat beside me. Alexandra, is there something you'd like to say to the family? My sister lifted her head and looked straight at me. Her voice was raspy, shaky, but clear. This week, my doctor diagnosed me with borderline personality disorder, BPD. I kept a calm face, but inside, fragments of memory began snapping into place. Every irrational fight, every manipulation, every emotional flip, now forming a clearer picture. I've always felt like everyone would leave me, Alexandra continued. So I cling, I control, I sabotage, especially with Kennedy. I always believed she would take everything I had. I didn't react. No smirk, no nod, just listened. And Max, too. When he started confiding in her, laughing with her, I panicked. I felt replaced, like I was drowning. My mother reached out and took her hand. Alexandra pulled away, not harshly, but honestly. No need to comfort me, Mom. I'm not saying this to get forgiveness. It's just the first time I want to be honest, no excuses. Dad nodded slowly, then turned to me. What about you, Kennedy? I took a breath. I'm willing to attend family therapy, but on one condition. What condition? My mom asked, a note of concern in her voice. I need space. No texts at midnight, no surprise dinners, no casual invites. Every interaction has to be mutually agreed upon, not just because we're sisters we have to endure each other. I looked Alexandra in the eyes. I'm not going back to being the sister who always forgives. I don't want to live in defense mode anymore. If there's going to be healing, it starts with respecting boundaries. Alexandra stayed quiet for a long moment, then nodded. Fair, you have that right. This time I won't try to bend it anymore. My mom sighed, eyes glassy. We should have seen this sooner. What we thought was sibling rivalry was actually a silent cry for help. Dad stood and pulled a stack of printed papers from his pocket. These are appointments with a family therapist. Weekly sessions. Everyone shows up. We won't repeat our parents' mistakes, denial, silence, and the every family has problems excuse. I took the paper and folded it without a word. The meeting didn't end with tears or cinematic hugs. It ended in a strange, still quiet, as if we all understood this would be long, messy, but at least, for the first time, everyone was ready to truly begin. Just before I left, Alexandra stepped toward the door and paused. You don't have to answer now, but if someday you want to hear me say sorry again, sincerely, the right way, I'll still be here. I didn't reply, but for the first time, as I closed the door behind me, I didn't feel like I had to lock it. I just let it rest ajar. Because this time, I wanted to be the one who decides if and when it opens again. 6 months after the family meeting, I received a message from Alexandra. Can you give me an hour? Just coffee. No pressure, no past talk if you're not ready. I read the message 4 times. No exclamation points, no hidden jabs, no begging. For the first time in my life, an invitation from my sister came with no strings, no manipulation. I said yes, but I picked the cafe. A quiet spot on the west side where I usually worked on weekends. Neutral ground. Familiar to me, not to her. Safe. Alexandra arrived right on time. Not early to assert control, not late to provoke. She wore a cream hoodie, hair tied back, face bare. No lipstick, no mascara, no armor. Hi, she said softly, sitting across from me. Hey, I replied, placing my phone on the table, a subtle boundary. We ordered drinks. I got my usual oolong tea. She asked for water. Just water. No sugar-free soy latte with 3 modifiers. Just a quiet, almost startling choice. Are you doing okay? She asked. I'm all right. She nodded. No probing. After a short silence, she spoke. I've been going to therapy 3 times a week, one-on-one with ABD specialist, 1 group, 1 session focused on conflict behavior. I didn't know what to say, so I nodded. I've been doing the homework, journaling, tracking impulses and breaking them down later. At first, I thought it was a joke. I chuckled. I thought the same when I started. But then I realized I've lived my whole life on reflex. Couldn't tell what was real pain and what was imagined. And the moment I felt even a hint of threat, I struck first. Her voice didn't shake. She wasn't asking for pity. She was just telling the truth, like someone describing a scar. My mother's voice echoed down the back stairs. What about Mac? Divorce is finalized, she said, looking down. We split everything. He doesn't want contact, and I respect that. I sat there. I thought I'd feel satisfied hearing that, but I didn't. It was just sad. Not for them, but because loss is still loss, no matter who it happens to. I moved out of the city, she said. Now I'm in Salem, Oregon, part-time work with a nonprofit for women after divorce, not as a director, just staff. I write outreach content, help with the summer campaign. I almost asked, you're really doing that, but instead, I asked, do you feel lighter? For the first time, Alexandra smiled, not forced, not smug, not broken. Yes, it's strange, but yes. We sat there for a while. No dramatic apology, no sweeping promises. Just 2 women, once called sisters, relearning what that word could mean. I don't expect forgiveness, she said, eyes steady. I just hope. One day, if it feels right to you, maybe we can build something new. Not from blood, from understanding. I was quiet. Then I said slowly, maybe. But this time, boundaries stay. No crossing lines. Deal, she said right away. If I slip, you can call me out. Not to shame me, just to help me remember why I want to change. I nodded, something inside me softened. Not forgiveness, but maybe acceptance. When we parted, she didn't hug me, didn't ask to. She just said, thank you for coming. I watched her walk away. No swagger, no scanning the room for control. Just a woman, with a tangled past and a future still unwritten. 1 month after our reunion, I received a postcard from Alexandra. Not an email, not a text, a real postcard with a photo of the Seattle shoreline at dusk. On the back, just 12 words. I'm not running away. I'm starting over. I stared at it for a long time, tracing the familiar slant of her handwriting. Less perfect now, no longer trying to impress. It felt like a sigh between 2 people who'd stopped needing to prove who was right. Alexandra had really moved. Mom said she rented a small apartment in Fremont near Gasworks Park. She's still working part-time for the women's support nonprofit. Recently, she even enrolled in an online counseling course to understand myself before trying to help others. I don't know where Alexandra's path will lead, I don't pretend her changes are permanent. But for the first time, I don't feel pulled by expectations or on alert. I'm simply an outsider, watching a family member with cautious but gentle eyes. And me? I'm still in Greenville, living in my two-bedroom apartment near downtown. I'm not trying to be noble, nor am I forcing myself to forget everything that happened. I still wake up some nights remembering that moment when Alexandra slipped something into my wine, and that chill crawling up my spine. But I've also learned not to let that wound define me. After all, anger might protect you in a crisis, but it can't nourish you long term. I keep going to therapy. I'm learning to rewrite my boundaries, not out of fear this time, but out of clarity. I've been pruning my relationships, keeping only those who don't make me feel small in my own life. Max and I still check in, an occasional birthday text, a shared article about mental health. He's moved to Asheville, North Carolina, and opened a bookstore cafe. In the pictures he sends, he smiles more, his hair a bit longer, looking nothing like the man in a suit from that long-ago party. I'm happy for him. And for myself, for letting go of what couldn't be saved. Whenever someone asks me about Alexandra, I no longer say, my sister is a control freak. Now I say, my sister is trying to become someone new. I don't know how long that will last. Nothing is guaranteed. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Real change doesn't begin the moment you say, I'm sorry. It begins the moment you stop trying to prove you were never wrong. I haven't fully forgiven, maybe I never will, but I'm ready for the long road to healing. Mine and of those I once loved, once hurt for, once couldn't walk away from. One quiet Sunday afternoon, I passed by the cafe where we met. It was busy. I didn't go in, I just stood outside for a moment. I smiled. Not for anyone else, but because for the first time in my life, I felt light. And not because of someone else. Because I chose to be. Someone once asked me, why doesn't Kennedy hate her sister after everything she did? This is what I told them. Because hatred is a chain that keeps two people bound forever. And I've learned how to pick the lock. Not everyone deserves to stay in your life. But some people, if they truly want to, will learn to walk back in through the front door instead of breaking in with guilt or tears. Alexandra knocked. I haven't fully opened the door, but at least I'm not building walls anymore. And sometimes that's the first step towards something different. Not perfect, not forgetful, but real enough to begin again. Even if all it says is, I'm still here, if you're ready. Kennedy's story is a powerful reminder that not every family wound can heal overnight. But honesty and clear boundaries are where real healing begins. In real life, many grow up in families marked by rivalry and pain, yet still believe forgiveness is automatic. The truth is, you have the right to protect yourself, to be respected, and to reconnect only when both sides are willing to do the work. Sometimes the biggest step isn't forgiveness. It's choosing not to be hurt anymore. What do you think of Kennedy's journey and her choices? Have you ever experienced something similar? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more real-life stories about family and healing.
My name is Kennedy, 36 years old, a researcher at a medical institute in Portland. After more than a decade of grinding in the lab and chasing grants, I bought a small 2-story house perched on a quiet hill in Lake Oswego. I planted roses along the stone path, designed each room myself, and painted the kitchen in my favorite shade. My first real taste of freedom. I hadn't told anyone I was coming home early from a cancer conference in Boston. My flight was canceled, and instead of staying another night at the hotel, I booked a connecting ticket through Denver and grabbed an Uber home. It was close to 8 p.m. I figured I'd water the garden before dark and treat myself to a glass of wine. But as I approached the gate, a familiar burst of laughter echoed from the first-floor window. And I froze. My heart skipped a beat. "This house is way too big for just her," said Hannah, my younger sister, loud enough for me to hear every word. I stood still, keys clutched in hand, not yet in the lock. Through the slightly parted curtains, I could see my parents sitting at the dinner table. Hannah was beside her husband, Mark, his hand resting on her thigh like he belonged there. "She won't mind," Mark chimed in, his voice slick as cheap syrup. "Kennedy always gives in. I borrowed her car for a month without asking and she didn't say a word." "Actually," Hannah giggled, "Mark and I are thinking of moving in here for a few months, just until we get things settled with buying a house. She's busy with that science conference or whatever. She won't even notice." I stood paralyzed. They had no idea I was barely 10 feet away, outside the window, in the dark. The same yard I'd spent dozens of hours landscaping now echoed with voices planning to move in. As if my house were an abandoned Airbnb. "This house," my mom said, lifting her glass of white wine, "is perfect for a young couple starting their journey. Open kitchen, backyard, spare room for a nursery. Kennedy's always away. She'll understand." My dad nodded, his tone flat like this had been rehearsed. "Don't ask, just present it as a done deal. She always caves." "I don't remember when I dropped my keys." The metal clinked sharply on the stone, and Mark tilted his head slightly. I instinctively backed into the rosebush, heart racing, thorns tearing a small hole in my pants. I bit my lip hard enough to taste blood, just to keep from swearing out loud. "What the hell is going on?" I screamed internally. I bought this house with my own hands, every dollar earned alone. No one gave me anything. And yet here they were, discussing moving in, like I didn't even exist. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. A text lit up the screen. "Hey sis, free tonight? Come by mom and dad's for dinner, we've got good news." "Dida," from Hannah. I let out a dry laugh that scraped my throat. That's when I knew. They weren't planning to stay temporarily. They were plotting to take everything. And they were counting on me to fold, just like all the times before. I turned away, walking slowly back to the car, blood still seeping from the tear in my pants. But that pain was nothing compared to the sting of betrayal. I drove through the winding streets of East Portland, night fully fallen. The streetlights stretched ahead like a string of silent warnings. My hands still trembled slightly on the steering wheel. I couldn't remember how many turns I'd made. I just knew my destination. An old tile-roofed house, tucked deep in a nearly forgotten neighborhood. My Aunt Pearl's, my father's youngest sister. In my family, Pearl's name hadn't been spoken since I was in high school. All I knew was that she once had a fierce argument with my grandparents and parents over a property dispute, then cut ties completely. Every time I asked, my mom would just shake her head and say, "Don't be like Aunt Pearl, too proud, and nobody wants to keep you around." But right now, I needed someone who didn't want to keep me around, to keep me sane. I parked in front of her house around 9 p.m. The faded blue paint, the wide porch lined with hanging baskets, and warm yellow light spilling from the kitchen window. None of it had changed. I wasn't sure she'd even recognize me. The last time we met was 15 years ago, at a funeral, where she was pushed to the fringe like a shadow. I rang the bell, my palm was ice cold. The door opened in under 3 seconds. A woman with snow-white hair tied back, sharp eyes behind metal-framed glasses, appeared. She studied me for a moment. "Kennedy?" I swallowed hard, nodded. "I need to talk about everything." The silence stretched so long I thought she might shut the door. Then she swung it wide open. "Come in. Don't stand out there giving the neighbors something to gossip about." I stepped inside. The scent of old wood, mint, and a hint of cinnamon cookies floated through the air. I felt like I had fallen out of the false world I once called family. "Sit down." She pointed to a wooden chair by the dining table. "Hungry?" I shook my head, though my stomach churned. I just overheard them plotting to take my house. Hannah, Mark, my parents. They're planning to move in while I'm gone. They haven't changed, she said, pouring tea. Still thinking they have the right to take from anyone too quiet for too long. I looked at her. Do you believe me? No need to, I understand. She set a cup in front of me. I had a house in Bend. Your dad and the others tried to sell it out from under me to split the money. I refused. They called me selfish. Then they hired a lawyer and forged my signature. I stared, stunned. I sued, won, but the cost was being cut off by the entire family. I don't regret it. I sat in silence, breath shallow. Now it's your turn. She sat across from me, her gaze sharp as a blade. What do you need? Help me keep my house. I don't know legal strategies, but I know they're working to make this look like a done deal. I want to be ready. Smart. She nodded. Do you have proof? Not yet, but I know they're planning it behind my back. Hannah texted me about dinner like nothing's wrong. She scoffed. They pulled that on me too. Scheming behind your back, then smiling at dinner like it's all love and unity. I gripped my teacup tightly. I'm done being silent. Then don't be. She stood and pulled an old metal box from a cabinet. Inside were documents, business cards, and a USB drive. I've stayed in touch with my old attorney. Trustworthy man. There's also a property investigator. Helped me overturn a fraudulent title once. I looked at her and the fear inside me started to fade. Not because I was sure I'd win, but because I finally wasn't alone. I have one question, I said. Why didn't you fight louder back then? Why let them paint you as the outcast? She shrugged. Because I still believed they might come around. Biggest mistake of my life was waiting for people to wake up. What about you? Without hesitation I answered, I'm not waiting for anyone. She nodded. Then go all the way, but remember, Kennedy, fight not to win. Fight so they can't swallow you whole. I left around 10 p.m. carrying the names of 3 people. An attorney, a private investigator, and a real estate broker who could trace quiet transactions in the neighborhood. I knew Hannah and Mark weren't targeting my house just because it was convenient. They were running from something. All I had to do was find it before they sealed the door on me again. Sunday afternoon, I arrived at my parents' house in Hillsdale, following Hannah's oh-so-casual invitation. The sky hadn't gone completely dark yet, but the shadows from the old oak trees out front cast a dull gray light over the house, the kind of light that usually accompanied uncomfortable conversations. The door opened before I could knock. You're here, Hannah chirped, hugging me just enough not to smudge her mascara. Behind her, Mark stood in the kitchen, holding a bottle of red wine like he owned the place. Did she make it back from the conference on time? My mother called out from the dining room, her voice sugary sweet in a way that made my skin crawl. We're making your favorite roast? I took a deep breath, nodded politely, and stepped inside. The air was thick with the smell of meat, wine, and something so fake it left a taste in my mouth. Dinner started the same way it always did, if you ignored the fact that 3 nights ago I caught them plotting to take my house. Dad rambled about the local baseball team, Mom bragged about some new pear preserves she'd learned to make, and Hannah launched into her plans for a yoga workshop for spiritual high-op normal women. I sat there chewing greens like it was the last thing I could still control. The real show began when Mark set his wine glass down and turned to me, his voice laced with suspicious innocence. Hey Kennedy, he began. Have you ever thought that maybe your house is too big for just one person? I mean, you're barely there. You're always at conferences, in the lab, at the research center. Before I could answer, Hannah jumped in. We actually just found out some really exciting news, she said, placing her hand gently on Mark's and then on her belly. We're thinking about starting a family. And honestly, your house would be perfect for us to begin that journey. That sentence rang out like a fire alarm across the dinner table. I put my knife down. What exactly are you saying? Mom was quick to respond. Don't overreact. Hannah's just sharing an idea. That house is a little much for one person. You've missed so many family moments, Dad added. And Hannah's always been here, present, caring. That house would be a great start for them. You can still keep your name on the deed, it's just them moving in, living there, like it's theirs? I cut in, my voice colder than I expected. Mark chuckled, trying to keep it light. You're misunderstanding. We just need something stable for a few years. We'd help take care of the place, pay a few small bills if needed. A few years? I scanned the table. Has everyone forgotten I bought that house? Alone. With my money. Not a single cent from anyone here. There you go again, Hannah sighed, slipping into her usual condescending tone. Listing your achievements like always. But you don't even live in that house, you live in your lab. That place is just a bloated Stop, I said, each word sharp. That house is the one thing I built that no one could take from me, and no one is going to divvy it up behind my back. Silence swallowed the room. Mom forced a smile. Kennedy, no one's dividing anything. We're just making a suggestion. Suggestion? I laughed, bitter rising in my throat. What about the move-in plan I overheard 3 nights ago? The toasts to the new home while I was outside the window, listening to every word. Hannah paled. Mark squeezed her hand. Were you spying on us? She snapped. No need to spy when your voice was loud enough to rattle the glass. I leaned forward. You asked why I don't show up for family dinners anymore? This. Right here. This is why. Dad slammed his hand on the table. Kennedy, that's enough. You're ruining a family meal. I stood up, pushing my chair back. A meal where you plot to steal your eldest child's house behind her back isn't a family dinner. I turned to leave, but Mom's voice caught me. You're ruining everything. Hannah is pregnant. I stopped, turned back. Then that's all the more reason to make sure the home you bring a child into is built on truth, not a house of lies. I left without slamming the door. The crash inside had already been loud enough. I didn't need to raise my voice. They'd revealed everything on their own. I didn't go straight home after that chaotic dinner. My heart was still pounding like it might tear out of my chest, so I turned directly to Aunt Pearl's. Her kitchen lights were still on, bright against the quiet of the night, and her old radio hummed with an evening financial news broadcast in the background. She looked at me without asking a thing, just poured a cup of hot tea and set it down on the old wooden table, already covered with folders and documents. You came at the right time, she said, cutting straight to the point. I asked an old friend to look into Mark's financials. I snapped my head up. You mean, a private investigation? Exactly, and you should brace yourself. She slid a thick stack of documents toward me. The first page was a summary of mortgage loans. My vision blurred as I saw my parents' address. Wait, did they mortgage the house? I flipped to the next page. $650,000? 8 months ago, Aunt Pearl confirmed. Right after Mark launched what he called a strategic investment fund, which was really just a dressed-up Ponzi scheme. I sat there, frozen. She handed me another stack. Bank statements, multiple wire transfers from my parents' account to a web of shell companies, all traced back to Mark. I remember Mark talking about long-term sustainability projects in California, I murmured. He called it a new generation capital cycle. I thought he was just showing off. Aunt Pearl didn't laugh. She pulled a USB from a drawer. This has information on 3 real estate lots on the outskirts of Gresham. The buyer is listed as Fairview Holdings, but Mark's behind it. He used your parents' money to buy foreclosed properties, flipped them under different names, and resold them for triple the price. That's illegal, I said, fists clenching. He's exploiting the family, laundering money through real estate. That's not all, she continued. One of those properties is under federal review for forged contracts. An ex-IRS investigator is currently tracking his activity. I collapsed into the chair, hands gripping the documents as my thoughts spiraled. Did Hannah know? Or was she just a blindly loyal pawn? You think Hannah's involved? I asked. She transferred funds to a personal account in Mark's name. Not much. About 20,000. But enough to implicate her if charges are filed. My fingers went numb. This wasn't just about a house anymore. They'd pushed things far beyond what I'd imagined. If this imploded, my parents would lose everything. Hannah might face prosecution. And Mark? He'd drag everyone down with him. Why didn't they say anything? I barely recognized my own voice. Why didn't my parents tell me? Why pretend everything's fine? Because they're scared, Aunt Pearl said, her tone flat. Scared of shame. Of admitting they trusted the wrong person. Of realizing they've lost control of their own family. I stared at the evidence. Every number cut deep. Every transaction felt like a betrayal. I used to think I was the disposable one. Turns out, I was the lifeboat they planned to quietly climb into. What are you going to do? She asked, watching me closely. I took a deep breath. Start with Mark. He's the root. If I can prove he's been scamming them, the rest will collapse like dominoes. I've got someone for that, she said, pulling a business card from her wallet. Natalie Hargrove. Former financial crimes auditor, now private investigator. Not cheap, but worth every dollar. I took the card. Black background. Simple white text. We don't reclaim your reputation. We prove it was never lost. I smiled, cold and steady. I'll meet her tomorrow morning. Aunt Pearl nodded, poured more tea. Good. You're not fighting this alone anymore. I stayed another hour, marking every document, photographing each piece of evidence, emailing them to my encrypted archive. As I left, I paused on the front steps, watching the kitchen lights spill onto the quiet street like a beacon. In the dark, I pulled out my phone and typed a message to Hannah. Do you know what Mark's really doing? No reply, but I didn't need one anymore. Monday morning, just as I was about to leave the house to meet with investigator Natalie, there was a sharp, urgent knock at the door. I glanced at the doorbell camera. It was Hannah. No makeup, hair in a tight bun, gray hoodie, black leggings. Her face was pulled taut like a wire about to snap. I cracked the door open. Were you planning to ghost me completely? Hannah asked, skipping any pleasantries. I'm heading out, I replied curtly, keeping my hand on the door to block her from coming in. What is it? What the hell was that text last night? She shot back like a stone into still water. Mark's freaking out. Mom's been crying all morning. Are you really planning to blow everything up? I looked at my sister. Not the little girl in frilly dresses who used to follow me around the backyard. Standing in front of me was a grown woman. Or rather, a co-conspirator, desperately trying to cover up what was already unraveling. Fine, I said, opening the door fully. You want to talk? Come in. But, be ready. Hannah walked in without a word. I shut the door and pointed to the dining table where folders lay open, plastered with notes and highlighted pages. She scanned the mess quickly, her eyes darting. What is all this? Evidence, I replied. Of the mortgage loan on Mom and Dad's house. The shell companies Mark's using to launder money through real estate. The transactions in Gresham. The retirement fund they funneled into a strategic investment fund that doesn't legally exist. Hannah's face drained of color. Where did you get this? Aunt Pearl helped me, and a former IRS investigator is confirming its legal weight. You can't. Can tell the truth? I cut her off. They're trying to steal my house, to cover up a financial sinkhole you call a family plan. Did you think I'd stay silent like always? She sank into a chair, hands gripping the edge of the table. You don't get it. We just needed a few months. Mark needed time to move money around. Mom said you'd understand if you knew the reason. And that reason is, what? That you all decided to cut me out? Use my house as your storm shelter? And then pretend nothing happened once the dust settles? Mark has a plan. Mark has a trail of fraud reports and a pending federal investigation. I snapped, tossing a photocopy of Natalie's report at her. Did you know he's being watched? Hannah looked down. That silence said more than any denial could. She knew. Maybe not everything, but enough to realize she was backing something rotten. I didn't have a choice, she whispered. You know how Mom is. If I didn't go along, she would have cut me off completely. I'm pregnant, Kennedy. I didn't respond right away. The only sound was the faint grind of my teeth. And so, I said quietly, voice sharp as glass, you chose to let him take us all down with you? I didn't think it would get this far. Not thinking is one thing, I said coldly, but to raise a glass in my house? Behind my back. That's no longer an accident. Anna stood, eyes glossy but her voice steady. So what now? You going to the police? Going to press charges on Mom and Dad too? Put me in jail while I'm carrying a child? I stared at her for a long moment, then turned away. I'm not putting you anywhere. You walked into this willingly. I'm just pulling the curtains open. She trembled, saying nothing. You said you needed a few months to stay over, I added, looking back. But let's be real. You might only get a few weeks, because if this collapses, this house, and you, will fall apart before that baby even gets here. Don't, she whispered. Don't drag everyone down. I walked to the door and opened it. Get out, Hannah. And tell Mark. Time's up. She stood frozen for a few seconds, then walked out silently, not saying another word. When the door clicked shut behind her, I leaned against the wall. My hands were shaking. But my heart? It didn't hurt anymore. Wednesday afternoon, I sat in my car on NW 23rd Street, 1 block away from the Copper and Birch Cafe. Natalie had warned me. Let him feel in control. If he thinks he's leading the conversation, he'll dig his own grave. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Cream blouse, hair neatly tied back, light makeup. A discreet recording device was tucked into my left ear. I lightly touched my collar, where a second mic was clipped beneath the fabric. My phone buzzed. He's here. FBI is in position. Stay calm. Don't interrupt unless necessary. Text from Natalie. I walked into the cafe. The place smelled like espresso and old walnut wood. Mark, Hannah's husband, was already seated, crisp white shirt, gold watch, smiling like he owned the city. Hey Kennedy, he said, standing and shaking my hand as if this were a friendly catch-up. I appreciate you taking the time to meet. I want to understand everything, I said, taking my seat, eyes locked on his face. About this so-called family plan you all discussed behind my back. Mark chuckled. Oh, that was just a misunderstanding. You know, your house is big and things have been a little turbulent for us lately. So you want to use my home for stability, I tilted my head. And to keep funding your operations. A flicker of surprise passed across his face. You know about that? I know more than you think, I said, sitting up straight. Like how you used Fairview Holdings to purchase 3 foreclosed properties in Gresham, then funneled them through Northgate Capital, a company in your brother's name, but funded by my parents' accounts. Mark narrowed his eyes, still smiling. I didn't realize you followed finance so closely. Only when someone tries to turn my house into collateral for their pyramid scheme. He leaned back, sipped his coffee, then placed the cup down softly. You're a smart woman, Kennedy. I won't pretend. But you also know every investment carries risk. We're talking about family here. About our shared future. Family? I scoffed. The same family that toasted to their new home while I was outside the window listening? That family? Mark's gaze sharpened. The polished mask was beginning to crack. I need that house to keep everything from falling apart. Because you're under investigation? I lowered my voice. Because the IRS has flagged your transactions? Because your shell companies are red flags for money laundering? His lips tightened. What do you want? He asked, voice dropping. I want you to say it. All of it. Clearly. No games, I replied, leaning back. Because even if I wasn't listening, the FBI already is. Silence. His eyes darted, to the door, to the barista, back to me. "You're recording me?" he asked, voice sharp as a blade. "I don't have to," I replied calmly. "You're giving it all up willingly. But the good news is, I am recording." Mark clenched his fists on the table. I could see the wheels turning. After a pause, he let out a breath and relaxed his shoulders. "Fine. I used your parents' money to buy low-cost homes, flip them, and pocket the margins. Problem is, one deal's paperwork is faulty. If it gets investigated, everything crumbles. I need new funds. A place to lie low for a few months. And you chose my house." I nodded. "No title, no paperwork, no consent. I figured you'd understand. You're the one who always keeps the family balanced." "Not anymore," I said coldly. "You've reached my limit." He shot up from his chair. "You have no idea what you've started." "Actually," I said with a small smile, "I know exactly." Right then the door opened. Two plainclothes men walked straight to our table. "Mark Evans?" the taller one asked, flashing a badge. "FBI, you'll need to come with us." Mark turned to me, eyes filled with fury. "You'll regret this, Kennedy. Your whole family won't survive what's coming." I said nothing as they cuffed him and led him away. In my earpiece, Natalie's voice came through. "We've got enough. Well done. Next target. Hannah." I stood, left the cafe to the murmurs behind me. Outside, the pale sunlight spilled across the damp pavement. I didn't know how long this would go on. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid to see it through. 3 days after Mark's arrest, I returned to my childhood home, not out of nostalgia, but because Natalie said I needed to be there. The FBI briefing was scheduled to happen right in the living room, the same one that had hosted dozens of dinners, where I was treated like a shadow. My parents were already seated. Ronald and Sandra Moore, both in their 60s, sat across from each other like strangers. No classical music, no vanilla candles, just the musty air of a house that hadn't been truly lived in for years, and the silent tension of truth about to surface. I walked in and set my document bag on the wooden table. Natalie followed, carrying a laptop and 2 printed transcripts of verified audio evidence. "What have you gotten yourself into, Kennedy?" my mother asked, her voice hoarse, eyes red. "You called the FBI? Why would you do this to your sister?" I looked straight at her. "I did what had to be done to stop this family from drowning. Though it might be too late." Natalie opened her laptop. The recordings filled the heavy silence. "We used Mom and Dad's money. Peter said just a few months we'd pay it back. Kennedy's never even home anyway. She won't notice. Think of it as helping family." Hannah's voice. Calm, assured, no hesitation. Next came Mark's voice from our cafe meeting. "I need that house to stop everything from falling apart. I used your parents' money to buy foreclosures, flip them. If this unravels, I need a safe spot. That house is our lifeline." When the audio stopped, my father, the man who used to beat his chest at the dinner table, preaching about the perfect family, leaned back like he'd been punched. "We mortgaged the house. Everything," he whispered. "And my son-in-law turned it into a laundering tool?" "Worse," Natalie said, calm and exact. "We're currently reviewing documents that suggest Hannah may have knowingly facilitated the attempted transfer of ownership for Kennedy's home." "There are signs of forged documents." "No, that can't be true," my mother murmured. "Hannah wouldn't do that. She just listens to her husband." I turned to her. "That's what you always say. When she maxed out my credit card, when she borrowed my scholarship money, when she signed up for a phone line in my name, you always said she didn't mean it, she just needed help." "But what about me? Did you ever believe me?" She turned away. Natalie shut the laptop and handed them both documents. These forms acknowledge that you've been fully informed about your daughter and son-in-law's legal status. Hannah is in custody pending further investigation. Bail may be possible. Mark is not eligible. The evidence is too strong. My father held the paper but didn't read it. I can't believe it. Both of them? Involved in this? Not two, I corrected. 3. Without your mortgage, they wouldn't have had the capital to run this scheme. No one forced you. You chose. Blind trust over logic. My mother looked up at me. For the first time in years, she cried, openly. We were wrong, she said through sobs. Wrong about Hannah? About Mark? About you? My father lowered his head to the table. His gray hair shook with each unsteady breath. You were always the strong one, he muttered. And we turned our backs on you, left you alone. I said nothing. I hadn't come for apologies. I came to end the cycle I had survived my whole life. Natalie stood, gave me a nod and left, leaving the house hollow, like the memories it held. What will you do? My mother asked, her voice nearly gone. About Hannah? About all of this? I rose and adjusted my bag. I'm not saving anyone from the consequences. Not even myself if it comes to that. But I won't let anyone pull me under again. I turned to leave, my hand on the doorknob. My father called after me. You're still our daughter. I didn't look back. I was. But now I'm the only one in this house, still living with the truth. I walked away. Not with victory, but with the collapse that had always been coming. 6 months after the trial ended, the first snow dusted the rooftop of the house on the hill in Lake Oswego, the house that had nearly slipped through my fingers. But I was still here. Alone? And free. Mark was sentenced to 12 years in prison on 3 counts: financial fraud, money laundering, and falsifying legal documents. Hannah, after desperately clinging to her role as a manipulated victim, finally admitted her part in forging real estate paperwork. She received a suspended sentence of 3 years, with mandatory community service and a 5-year ban from all financial dealings. On the day of sentencing, I stood outside the courtroom, not to avoid them, but because there was nothing left to say. The truth had already been recorded, signed, stamped, and filed. For good. My parents, no longer able to keep their home after their assets were frozen to repay damages, were invited by Aunt Pearl to live with her. She was blunt. They don't deserve it. But sometimes, lessons only stick if someone witnesses the aftermath. I didn't protest. I didn't interfere. Their lives were no longer my concern. This past spring, I renovated the house. Not because it was broken, but because I wanted to strip away every trace of those who once plotted to use me as a fallback plan. The living room was repainted, in a deep olive tone. The room that was once meant to be a nursery became a reading nook. A small library for my research, grant proposals, and a quiet corner to brew tea. But the biggest transformation didn't happen in bricks or paint. I joined a mentorship program for young women in medicine and science. One day, I told a senior student, "No one has the right to call you selfish for standing tall instead of shrinking yourself to support others." She stared at me for a long time, then broke into tears. And I understood. I didn't need blood ties to feel the warmth of kinship. I also founded a fund called the Lily House Fund, named after the flowers I planted along my porch. It provides emergency financial support to women forced into debt by others. Every month, I read their letters. Each one was a variation of my story. Exploited by family. Silenced for the sake of peace. Called too rational simply for having boundaries. One morning, I received a postcard from my mother. Kennedy. We've lost too much to finally see you were the only one who never backed down. If you ever want to join us for dinner at Aunt Pearl's, there's always a seat for you. I placed the postcard on the kitchen shelf, next to a jar of dried lavender. I didn't tear it. Didn't reply. but I didn't throw it away either. That evening, I drove downtown to the soup kitchen where I'd been volunteering for months. They had just received an anonymous donation of $50,000, along with a note that read, "From someone who almost lost everything, for thinking they weren't worth defending." As I helped a young boy scoop noodles onto his tray, his mother whispered, "Thank you, Miss Kennedy." I nodded. "It's nothing. It's just the start of a new week." Walking out, I looked up at the Portland night sky. No more harsh city lights, just clear darkness and scattered stars. I remembered what Natalie once told me as we waited for the FBI warrant to go through. Some people never change, but you can. And I had changed. Not into someone else, but into myself. Finally, a version of me unafraid of being called selfish or different. In the dark, I started the engine. The radio played a soft symphony, steady, like a breath after a long storm. I didn't need forgiveness. I just needed to keep living, this time, on my own terms. Kennedy's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes, the people who hurt us the most come wrapped in the label of family. But it's only when we step out of the role of silent sacrifice, when we speak up, set boundaries, and protect what's ours, that we truly start living. In real life, many, especially women, are still trapped by toxic family expectations. Kennedy didn't just save her house, she reclaimed her voice, her freedom, and her future. What do you think of Kennedy's decision? Would you have done the same? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, true-life stories ahead. I still vividly remember the day my little sister Mia was born. I was only 4 years old at the time, and my parents told me I was about to become a big sister. They said it would be wonderful, that I'd have a lifelong best friend. But what they didn't mention was that from that day forward, I would become invisible. My name is Sarah, and growing up in the Taylor family meant learning one hard truth early on. There was a clear hierarchy in our house. This determined, to me, Mia was at the top, and I was somewhere below, even the family cat. The differences in how my parents treated us weren't subtle, they were glaringly obvious in everyday life. Every morning my mom would make a custom breakfast for Mia, over easy eggs and toast cut into triangles, just the way her little princess liked. Meanwhile, I got handed a box of cereal and a spoon. When I needed braces, my dad complained about the cost for weeks, but 2 years later, when Mia needed braces, they didn't hesitate to buy her the expensive invisible ones, the kind I had once dreamed of but was told were too much. They justified it by saying, "Mia deserves it more." These disparities were everywhere. When I got an A on a difficult test, the most I received was a half-hearted nod from my dad. But when Mia landed a small role in a school play, the whole family went out to her favorite restaurant to celebrate. Birthdays made the differences even more obvious. My parties were simple: a store-bought cake, a few friends, and a backyard dinner. Mia's birthdays, on the other hand, were grand events with bounce houses, clowns, and elaborately decorated custom cakes. I tried to bring up the unfairness to my parents, but my complaints were always dismissed. "You're so practical, Sarah. Mia is different. She needs these things," my mom would say. As if I wasn't also her daughter. What hurt more was overhearing her tell a friend, "Sarah's so down to earth, she doesn't care about these little things, but Mia understands the value of everything." The worst part was watching Mia change over the years. As a child, she was sweet. We used to build blanket forts and tell silly stories together. But year after year, my parents' unconditional favoritism turned Mia into someone entirely different. Entitled and dismissive. By the time she was 10, she had become exactly the person everyone expected. "Sarah, where's my blue sweater?" she demanded one day, rifling through my closet without asking. "That's mine, Mia. Mom got it for my birthday," I replied, but of course that didn't matter. "Mom, Sarah won't share," Mia yelled. And, as always, my mom said, "Sarah, don't be selfish, let your sister borrow it." I learned to pick my battles, to lower my expectations, and to seek validation elsewhere. School became my refuge. While Mia was praised for participating in a small play, I won science competitions and excelled in advanced classes. But my achievements never seemed to matter. even when I earned a full-ride scholarship to a prestigious university. Dinner that night was all about Mia's campaign for class treasurer. I tried to interject, "I got a full scholarship, Mom," but she simply replied, "That's nice, honey," before turning back to ask Mia about her plans to hang campaign posters. Over the years, I came to realize that in my parents' eyes, I could never measure up to Mia. But that only fueled my determination to break free from the cycle. The favoritism and unfairness I endured didn't just hurt, they drove me to prove my worth, not to them, but to myself. During my final years of high school, I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't let my parents' indifference hold me back anymore. If they couldn't be proud of me, then I would be proud enough for the both of them. I set one clear goal: to escape the Taylor household and build a life where I no longer had to live in Mia's shadow. School was the only place where I felt valued, and I was determined to make the most of every opportunity to succeed. I threw myself into my studies with an almost obsessive determination. I spent countless hours in the library, poring over textbooks and researching every topic related to my classes. While Mia attended dances and weekend parties, I stayed up late working on assignments and preparing for the SATs. I didn't just want good grades, I wanted to be the best. And when the results came in, I achieved exactly that. I graduated at the top of my class and received an acceptance letter from one of the state's top universities, along with a full-ride scholarship. I still remember the day I held that acceptance letter in my hands, overwhelmed with joy and hope. I thought finally my parents would have to be proud of me. But that evening at dinner, as always, the conversation revolved around Mia. She had just been chosen as the assistant director for her school play. When I tried to share my exciting news, my mom brushed it off with a dismissive, "That's great, Sarah. But don't forget, Mia's really busy with her new role too." My happiness shattered, but instead of feeling sad, I gained clarity. I could no longer wait for their approval. My success didn't need validation from anyone but myself. When I started college, it felt like I was finally free. No longer under my parents' constant comparisons, I experienced true freedom for the first time in my life. I threw myself into my classes with a newfound enthusiasm, made friends who appreciated and respected me for who I was, and finally felt like I belonged. Meanwhile, Mia struggled to adjust to college life. My mom frequently called to complain that Mia felt overwhelmed and homesick, and she would add, "You are so focused on school that you don't even care about your sister." Those comments no longer hurt me, they only fueled my determination. In my second year, I began an internship at a small advertising agency. Even though I started with basic tasks, I worked hard and took every opportunity to learn from my coworkers. That effort paid off. By the end of my internship, I was offered a part-time position with a higher salary than I had expected. For the first time, I could cover my living expenses on my own and even start saving for my future. While Mia was still struggling to switch her major and relying on our mom to send her tuition payments, I was steadily building my career. After graduating with honors, I received a full-time job offer from a prestigious company in my field. My starting salary was enough not only to cover my living expenses but also to send a little money back to my parents each month. Even though they never seemed to care about my achievements, I still wanted to fulfill my duty as their daughter. Yet their indifference remained unchanged. Whenever I called home, the conversation always revolved around Mia, her new job, the parties she attended, or the challenges she faced. They never asked about my work, whether I was tired or if I needed anything. It seemed the only thing that mattered to them was the money I sent regularly. But that didn't bother me anymore. I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing it for myself. I knew I had overcome countless obstacles to get where I was, and that was enough for me. Those years were a time of self-discovery and growth. I not only rose above the indifference and unfairness I had endured, but also proved to myself that I could create my own worth. And while my parents never acknowledged me, I realized their approval no longer mattered. I had found pride where it truly counted. In myself. Life after college seemed to open a promising new chapter. I quickly settled into my role at a prestigious advertising agency and rented a small apartment near the city center. It was there that I reconnected with Ethan, a software engineer I'd known back in high school. We ran into each other at a casual get-together with old friends, and from our first conversation I felt a deep connection between us. Ethan was warm, caring, and seemed to understand the emotional scars I carried from my childhood. He made me feel valued and loved, something I had never truly experienced from my own family. We dated for 2 years before deciding to get married. Our wedding wasn't extravagant, just a small ceremony with Ethan's family and a few close friends. My own family attended, but they felt more like distant guests than actual relatives. By then, I didn't expect much from them, and honestly, it no longer hurt the way it once had. The early years of our marriage were calm and fulfilling. Ethan was a devoted husband, and I finally felt like I had found a true home. His family, especially his younger sister Jenny, welcomed me as one of their own. Jenny became the sister I had always wished Mia could be. A friend, a confidant, and someone who truly prioritized family. We spent weekends together, hosting family dinners and going on outings. Jenny supported me in every decision I made, and whenever I needed advice, she was the first person I turned to. However, things began to change after I gave birth to our son Noah. At first, Ethan was an incredible father, always present for me and Noah. But after Noah turned 1, I noticed Ethan becoming increasingly distant. He started coming home late, citing work as an excuse. Family dinners grew infrequent, and he began missing important moments in Noah's life. I tried to reassure myself that it was just the stress of adjusting to life as a parent, that Ethan just needed time to adapt. But the truth came out one otherwise ordinary evening. Ethan came home with a heavy look in his eyes and confessed that he had fallen in love with someone else, a client of his. "She understands me," he said, his voice trembling. My heart felt like it was being crushed. I couldn't believe the man I once thought was my rock had betrayed our family, yet for Noah's sake I kept my composure. We agreed to divorce amicably, and Ethan promised to take full responsibility for Noah, both financially and emotionally. After the divorce, I found myself in a void. But thankfully, Ethan's family, especially Jenny, never turned their backs on me. Instead, they became my greatest source of support during those difficult months. Jenny visited often, bringing homemade meals and spending hours playing with Noah so I could have some time to rest. Ethan's parents, Tom and Sarah, also showered Noah with love. He was always welcomed at their home, and whenever he was there, he lit up in the warmth of their care. Meanwhile, my own parents barely acknowledged what I was going through. Whenever I tried to bring Noah to visit them, it always ended in disappointment. They complained that Noah was too noisy, that he disrupted their routine, and they barely paid attention to their only grandson. But I had grown used to their indifference. Instead, I chose to focus on the people who truly cared, the ones who genuinely loved me and Noah. The divorce taught me a valuable lesson. Family isn't defined by blood. Family is made up of the people who choose to stand by you, not out of obligation but out of love. Jenny, Tom, and Sarah proved that to me. And because of them, I found the strength to move forward. Even though Ethan was no longer a part of my life, I realized I still had a family. A true family. Where both Noah and I were cherished, loved, and supported. I always thought that even if my parents never valued me, perhaps they would love Noah in some way. After all, he was their first and only grandchild. I tried to foster a relationship between my son and his grandparents. Occasionally I would take Noah to visit them, hoping they would spend time with him and show some affection. But things never turned out the way I hoped. Those visits usually ended in disappointment. "Sarah, don't let Noah knock over my crystal vase," my mom yelled, her eyes still glued to the magazine in her hands. "Be careful or he'll scratch the hardwood floor." I glanced down at Noah, who stood silently beside me, his tiny hand clutching my dress. I could see in his eyes that he sensed their coldness. It was the same look I had grown accustomed to as a child. But seeing my own child endure that same indifference broke my heart in a way I had never experienced before. The visits became even more difficult whenever Mia was around. Every time my sister walked into the house, the atmosphere shifted. "Here's our golden girl," my dad would beam, embracing Mia like she was the only light in his life. They barely even glanced at Noah, who was holding up his latest drawing, eager to share it. Every time, I'd end up pulling my tearful son out of their house, wondering why I kept trying to hold on to a relationship they clearly didn't care about. Then came the day I had to be rushed to the hospital for an emergency appendectomy. The pain struck me at work, and I was taken to the ER, where the doctor informed me I needed immediate surgery. My first thought was Noah. Who would pick him up from school? I called my mom, believing that in this urgent situation, she would prioritize her grandson above all else. The phone rang several times before she answered. "Mom, I'm at the hospital," I said, my voice shaky with pain. "I need surgery right away. Can you pick up Noah from school and watch him for a few days?" I pleaded, hope filling my heart. But her response was like a dagger to my chest. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm afraid I can't. Today's Mia's promotion party. We still have to prepare, and there will be over 40 guests. You understand, don't you?" "But Noah," I tried to argue, my voice breaking. "He needs someone to pick him up, Mom. He's just a child." "Sarah, you always make everything such a big deal. Noah is your responsibility, not mine," she said, her tone cold. "Don't let children become a burden." The call ended and I lay there in my hospital bed, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't believe that even in a moment of crisis, my parents couldn't put family above their trivial priorities. Desperate, I called Jenny. She didn't hesitate for a second. "Sarah, Noah is my nephew. Of course I'll go right away. Send me the school's details and I'll take care of everything," she said, her voice steady and reassuring. During my 2 days in the hospital, Jenny sent me pictures of Noah playing with Max, her family's dog, building blanket forts and baking cookies in her kitchen. I realized then that Noah didn't need his maternal grandparents to have a happy childhood. He already had Jenny, Tom, and Sarah, people who genuinely loved and cherished him. When I was discharged, I came home to find Jenny had prepared dinner, tidied the house, and even bought some new toys for Noah. Watching my son giggle as he played with Max, I realized something profound. Family isn't always about blood. Family is about the people who love you unconditionally and stand by you when you need them the most. A few weeks later, I decided to cut off the financial support I had been sending my parents. The money I had been using to help them pay off their car loans, a gesture they never once thanked me for, would now go toward Noah and our life together. When my mom called, her voice sickeningly sweet, asking if I could send more because Mia couldn't provide as much as they'd hoped, I simply replied, "I've done everything I can. You're on your own now." Then, I ended the call, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. I don't know how my parents and Mia will manage without my support, but it's no longer my concern. I have a real family now. People who are there for me when it matters most. And I will never let Noah feel abandoned or unimportant. He will always know he is loved and valued. After that final phone call with my mother, I knew it was time to make a decision, for myself and for Noah. I had spent far too many years trying to prove my worth to them, hoping that one day I'd receive the recognition and love I had always craved. But now I understood that all my efforts were in vain. They didn't see me as an important part of their family, and they certainly didn't care about Noah. I had to make it to Noah. I couldn't let their indifference and selfishness impact our lives any longer. It was a quiet Saturday evening at Jenny's house. Noah was playing with Max in the yard, his laughter ringing through the air and easing the weight of my exhaustion. Jenny brought out 2 cups of hot tea and sat beside me on the porch swing. "Sarah, I know this isn't an easy decision, but sometimes, to protect yourself and Noah, you have to do it," she said, her eyes filled with understanding. I nodded. "You're right, Jenny. I've tried for so long, but it's meaningless. I can't let Noah grow up thinking love has to be earned through suffering or one-sided sacrifice. I want him to know he's worthy of unconditional love, just like the way you and your family have shown him." The next morning I took the first steps to sever ties with my parents. I canceled the automatic monthly transfers, removed their numbers from my contacts, and blocked them on social media. It wasn't easy, but the sense of relief slowly outweighed the initial hesitation. I had spent too many years clinging to a relationship that only I was trying to build. Now, I was ready to let go and find real peace. The next day I deposited my bank account and made my way back out to the trading floor. In the weeks that followed, my parents bombarded me with phone calls, texts, and voicemail messages. At first, they were full of anger. "You're so ungrateful, Sarah. We're your family, you can't treat us like this." Later, the tone shifted to pleading. "Please, Sarah, just help us one more time. Emma can't manage and we have no one else to turn to." But I didn't respond. I knew that if I engaged, I would be pulled back into their cycle of exploitation and pain. Instead, I focused on what truly mattered. I spent more time with Noah, taking him to the park, reading bedtime stories, and baking his favorite cookies together. Jenny and her family remained by our side, creating a loving environment where Noah felt secure and cherished. During family dinners at their house, I no longer felt like an outsider. Instead, I felt valued and like I truly belonged. One day, Noah brought home a drawing from school. It was a family tree with little branches representing his loved ones. "Mom, I added Aunt Jenny, Grandpa Tom, Grandma Sarah, and Max too," Noah exclaimed excitedly. As I looked at the drawing, my heart swelled with emotion. My parents and Emma weren't on that family tree, and I knew that was exactly how it should be. Family isn't about titles or obligations. It's about those who love and support you unconditionally. Oh, I hung Noah's drawing on the living room wall, right next to a photo of us with Jenny's family from a recent picnic. Every time I looked at those images, I felt a deep sense of peace. I no longer needed to seek love from people unwilling to give it. I had found my true family. A place where Noah and I were loved completely. 3 months later, as things began to settle, I received a letter from my mother. It was long, filled with both accusations and apologies, but I didn't open it. I tucked it away in a drawer. Not to keep it, but because I no longer cared. Everything I needed I already had. A real family, where Noah and I truly belonged. The days that followed passed in calm and quiet contentment. I stopped keeping track of my parents or Emma, and it no longer mattered. I had learned that sometimes, to find true happiness, you have to be brave enough to let go of what hurts you. And that's exactly what I had done. For myself, and for my son. After cutting ties with my parents, it felt like a new door had opened in my life. A door leading to freedom. Freedom from unreasonable expectations, from blame, and from the indifference I had endured for so long. But above all, it was the freedom to love, and to be loved, fully and unconditionally. I began to focus completely on building a better life for Noah and myself. In the mornings, I would wake up early to prepare breakfast for Noah, watching his innocent face light up as he excitedly talked about what he planned to do at school that day. I made sure that every day of his was filled with joy and a sense of being loved. Small moments, like baking cookies together or reading books before bed, reminded me that true happiness isn't found in anything extravagant or complicated. It's in the simple, heartfelt moments of genuine love. Jenny and her family remained an essential part of our lives. To Noah, Jenny was like a true aunt, and Tom and Sarah felt like real grandparents. They constantly went out of their way to make us feel welcomed and part of their family. On weekend evenings, we often had backyard barbecues. Noah would play with Max, while Jenny and I sat and talked under the warm glow of the patio lights. In those moments, I realized that family isn't about who you're born to, but about those who choose to love and accept you. My career also began to flourish like never before. I gained the trust of my superiors and colleagues, taking on bigger, more challenging projects. Every achievement made me proud, not just for myself but because I was building a better future for Noah. Every paycheck I earned was invested in the things that mattered most: his education, experiences that allowed him to explore the world, and a loving home, where he could always feel safe. Still, the past occasionally found its way back to me. One day, while organizing old papers, I came across a photo of my family from years ago. In the picture, I stood next to Mia, my smile awkward and strained. My parents stood behind us, their faces beaming with pride as they looked at Mia, completely ignoring me. But as I stared at the photo, I didn't feel sad or angry anymore. Instead, I felt grateful for the hardships I had endured because they made me stronger. They taught me my worth and showed me that I didn't need to live to please anyone. When Noah came home with an award from school for his outstanding presentation, I hugged him tightly and told him how proud I was of him. The bright sparkle in his eyes assured me that I was on the right path. I wanted my son to grow up in an environment where he always knew he was loved and supported, where he never felt the need to prove his worth to anyone. That evening, after Noah had fallen asleep, I sat by the window and looked up at the starry sky. I thought about everything that had happened, the pain, the hurt, and the lessons I had learned. I had found freedom, not just from the past, but the freedom to create a brighter future. A future where Noah and I were surrounded by people who truly loved us. And I knew, despite how difficult this journey had been, I would never go back to the way things were. We were living a better life now, a life full of love and hope. And for me, that was everything. The lesson from this story is that family isn't always defined by blood ties, but by love, respect, and unconditional support. Sometimes letting go of toxic relationships is necessary to protect yourself and your loved ones. True freedom comes from living true to your values, building positive relationships, and focusing on what truly matters. Love doesn't need to be earned or proven, and happiness comes from finding and cherishing your real family. What do you think about this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel so you don't miss more inspiring stories about life, family, and meaningful lessons. Thank you for being with us. If you think being ignored is the worst thing that can happen in a family, then you've never been compared just to be dismissed. I wasn't just forgotten. I was erased from the blueprint of life my parents had designed. It felt like I was an extra in my own home, a defective product left behind simply because I wasn't the firstborn son. And the most painful part? They never had to say it out loud. I saw it every time my brother messed up and was met with praise. I felt it as sharply as an open wound every time I tried, and still got overlooked. My name is Amelia Turner. I was born and raised in a small town in Northern California, in a 2-story house with a red-tiled roof and bougainvillea climbing over the porch railings. From the outside it looked like the textbook middle-class dream. A dad who was a structural engineer, a stay-at-home mom, and 2 kids. 1 boy, 1 girl. Perfectly balanced. Unless you or me. My brother Noah is 2 years older than I am. Even as a child, he was the family pride. Whenever he accomplished anything, no matter how trivial, my parents would cheer like he had just won a full scholarship from NASA. When he was 6, Noah drew a stick figure, and my mom taped it to the fridge for the entire summer. And me? At 8, I drew a detailed map of the state of California, complete with rivers and mountain ranges. My mom tossed it in the trash because it was too complicated to display. I can't recall a single moment when I was ever seen as equal to Noah, like the time he kicked in the living room window while playing soccer indoors. My mom just sighed and said, "At least he didn't kick his sister." But when I accidentally spilled a glass of milk on the new dining table, I was made to scrub the whole house and got banned from watching TV for a week. I started noticing the difference when I was only 7. I remember clearly, it was the day I brought home my first report card in 2nd grade. I had nearly straight A's, except for a B in PE. I walked into the house with the paper in hand, my heart full of hope, expecting a hug, a celebration, the kind of praise Mom always gave Noah. She glanced at it, put it on the table and said nothing. No smile, no compliment. "That's fine, but a B in PE is kind of low," she said bluntly. The next day, Noah came home with 3 C's on his report card. My dad put an arm around him and laughed. "No worries, you're a realist. Grades aren't everything, you've got athletic talent." I stood on the staircase, hearing those words like a cold, sharp knife slicing through my chest. I started trying harder. Studying became my obsession. I joined the school reading club, entered spelling bees, math contests, anything that might earn me recognition. But I never got the proud looks they gave Noah. I was the faint shadow behind him, and no matter what he did, just being Noah was enough. Every morning I made my own cereal, tied my own shoes, double-checked my backpack. "Noah?" he just sat there. Mom did everything for him. Sometimes I wondered if she even noticed I lived in the same house. I remember once, when I was 10, I won second place in the county science fair with a project on the Sierra Forest ecosystem. I came home with a medal around my neck, heart swelling with pride. My dad glanced at it and went back to his paperwork. My mom said, "Well, keep it somewhere safe so it doesn't get lost." Mom, I've been lost for a long time. You can't misplace someone who was never really held onto in the first place. Meanwhile, every birthday of Noah's was like a royal event. Bounce houses, 3-tier cakes, 30 guests, fairy lights wrapped around the whole house. As for me, one year Mom even forgot. That evening when I reminded her, she just muttered, "I'll buy you something tomorrow." No cake, no candles, just me sitting in my room with an old doll and an empty promise. I used to ask myself, did I do something wrong? Am I not good enough? But no. I just wasn't Noah. And that was enough to make me the backup plan, in a family that had already chosen its champion. There were nights I lay in bed, the yellow hallway light spilling through the door crack, wishing I could disappear, or at least become truly invisible, so I wouldn't have to hear Noah's laughter from upstairs, paired with Mom's joyful voice. My amazing boy. I used to think no one in this world really saw me. Until one person did. Someone who made me believe I was worthy of love, not because of achievements or scores, but just for being me. My grandmother, Margaret, was the only bright light in an otherwise gray, chilly childhood. She lived just 5 blocks away in a small house with a lavender-filled backyard and a creaky old swing that felt like heaven. That was the one place I could breathe. She never asked me, "Why aren't you more like Noah?" She never said, "You need better grades to make your parents happy." Instead, she'd say, "Amelia, everyone is a different song. Don't let anyone force you to play the wrong tune." I'll never forget the first time I told her I'd won first place in the school essay contest about climate change. My mom barely reacted, my dad changed the channel. But when I brought the essay to Grandma, she hugged me tight, eyes glistening. "You wrote this? And nobody knows? That's a loss for the whole world." Then she laminated it and pinned it on her fridge next to old family photos like it was treasure. Every birthday, she remembered. Even if it was just a tiny cupcake with a crooked candle or a hand-knit scarf, her gifts came with one whispered line. "Today, the world got something good. And that's you." I never cried in front of her, but once, when she slipped a $20 bill into my coat pocket and whispered, "In case you need a book and don't want to ask anyone," I had to turn away so she wouldn't see my eyes welling up. Her kitchen was the only place I could laugh without fear. I could tell her about school, friends, even little hurts no one else bothered to notice. When I told her my parents missed my band performance, she didn't offer clichés. She just held my hand and said, "I'll ask for a video, we'll watch it together. I'll clap twice whenever something makes me smile." And I laughed, a real laugh, not forced, not hidden. Of course, she loved Noah too. She still went to his soccer games, brought cookies, cheered like any grandma would. But with me, she was different. She didn't show up out of duty. She showed up because she wanted to see me, to hear me. When I was 15, she started to weaken. She sat more, breathed harder, but still peeled apples for me out of habit. I told her to rest. She smiled and said, "If I don't peel them, how can I keep you sitting here 10 minutes longer?" My heart aches even now when I remember. I thought I was strong enough to survive anything, neglect, favoritism, invisibility in my own family. But when the doctor said she had late-stage cancer, my world collapsed. I went to the hospital every day after school. I skipped all my club meetings, just sat beside her, did homework, or read aloud. She liked hearing my old essays, even the messy drafts. One day, she called the whole family to the hospital. Me, Noah, my parents, we were all there. The room was still, the heart monitor beeping slowly. She took my father's hand. Her eyes were cloudy, but her gaze still carried weight. "George, can you promise me one thing?" My father nodded, though I saw hesitation in his eyes. The money I leave behind. Make sure it's for both kids, Noah and Amelia. They both deserve a future. My mom squeezed her hand and faked a smile. My father said, I promise, Mom. I don't know why, but in that moment, I believed him. I wanted to believe. I used to believe some promises were sacred, too sacred to be broken. I used to believe, wrong. 9 days after our last visit at the hospital, my grandmother passed away. The funeral took place on a crisp fall morning. Leaves layered the walkway, and the wind swept across black and white photos propped on wooden stands. One of them showed me sitting beside her on a porch swing, hair down, eyes smiling. I didn't cry at the funeral. Not because I was strong, but because the pain ran so deep that no tears could come. At the gravesite, I stood among extended family, watching my father bow his head, hand over his chest, solemn and composed. But I saw his eyes, not blurred by grief, but by something else, something quieter, colder. As he stood up, I heard him whisper to my mother, "We'll handle everything later, don't let Amelia hear." I was right behind them, and I heard every word. I didn't ask. I wanted to believe they were talking about paperwork, technicalities, not the promise he had made at her deathbed. But my gut, sharpened by years of sidelong glances and "we'll talk about it later" remarks, screamed something was wrong. After the funeral, life slid back into its usual orbit. Noah remained the family's star, and I, still the shadow behind the family's wall. But something in me had changed. I threw myself into college prep with a focus I'd never known before. It wasn't just about survival, it was war. A full scholarship wasn't just a goal, it was my lifeline. And yet, deep down, I still clung to a flicker of hope that the money Grandma left behind, money my father promised would be for both his children, was still there. The first acceptance letter came in mid-March. Evergreen State University, full scholarship, free dorm. I clutched the envelope, waking up at night to reread every line. But then, a few weeks later, came another letter. This time from Blackwood College, a prestigious private school with one of the top business programs on the West Coast. Partial scholarship, but a golden opportunity for anyone ready to leap. I knew I had to ask my parents about covering the remaining tuition. I knew I couldn't do this alone. That night, they had just come back from a reunion with Noah's old classmates. Mom still had her lipstick on, Dad was pouring bourbon into a glass. I took a deep breath. I got accepted to Blackwood College. "Oh, congratulations," my dad replied, not even looking up from his drink. "It's a great program, but expensive. I wanted to ask about my share of Grandma's inheritance." The room went cold in a second. Dad placed the glass on the table. "That money is gone." I froze. "Gone? We used it for some necessary expenses," he said, voice flat, like reading a financial report. Mom jumped in. "Noah had tuition due for his final year at Stanford, and the winter trip wasn't cheap either." It felt like someone punched me in the chest. "You promised her, in front of everyone. You said it would be for both me and Noah." Dad crossed his arms. "She was dying, Amelia. You think I'd let her worry in her final moments?" "You lied." "I told her what she needed to hear. Reality is, Noah needed it more than you, and you got a scholarship." I trembled so hard I had to grip the chair to steady myself. "So you chose vacations, chose Noah's future, and left me behind?" Mom looked at me, lips tight. "Don't blow things out of proportion, Amelia. You do have a scholarship?" I shouted, louder than I'd ever spoken in this house. "That's my achievement. I earned it on my own. Not a single cent came from this family." No one responded, no apology, no explanation. Only the soft clink of a glass on wood, the hum of the air conditioner, and the cold eyes of the two people who brought me into this world. Then my dad sighed. "If you feel that wronged, maybe it's time you started living independently." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're 18. If you're old enough to question things like this, you're old enough to live on your own." My mom nodded, stood up, her voice icy. As if this had been planned. Pack your things, you should leave by morning. I don't remember how long I stood there after they sentenced me out of their house. Just that my hands went numb as I dragged out the old suitcase from under my bed. The same one Grandma gave me in 7th grade, saying, "Someday, you'll go far on your own, but remember, home is wherever your heart is." And that night, my heart was all I had. Along with a pain I didn't yet know how to name. I didn't sleep. I sat in a corner, knees to chest, staring at the small things I tried to stuff into that cramped suitcase. Each time Mom passed by the door, she glanced in like I was an overstaying guest. No questions, no concern. At 9 o'clock the next morning, I walked out of that house with a suitcase, $365 I saved from tutoring cousins on the sly, and an acceptance letter from Evergreen I never really wanted to use. Jenny, my best friend, was the only person I messaged that night. "I need a place to stay just for a bit." Her reply was instant and short. "My door's always open, get here now." Jenny's tiny apartment was only 4 blocks from my parents' house, but it felt like a whole new world. When I arrived, she hugged me tight, no questions. She didn't need to ask, my face said it all. The first few days, I moved like a ghost, sleeping on her couch, barely speaking. But one afternoon, as we sat by her window, I said quietly, "I can't go to Blackwood." Jeannie frowned. "What? I thought that was your dream." "Dreams don't pay tuition, and my parents, they used Grandma's money to buy plane tickets to the Bahamas." I had never seen Jenny's expression turn that sharp. "They spent your grandmother's inheritance on a vacation?" In Noah's final year at Stanford, I only have one option left: Evergreen. Jenny stood up, turned away, her hands gripping the chair. I knew she was swallowing my anger for me. But I didn't feel anger anymore. I'd burned through that long ago. Now all I felt was cold. Not the cold of wind or snow, but the kind that seeps into your bones and stays there. I chose to accept the scholarship to Evergreen State University. It wasn't as prestigious as Blackwood, but it gave me something more valuable: independence. That summer, I worked at Sunny's Cafe, a little spot near campus where people bought lattes and sat for hours writing half-finished novels. I learned how to make cappuccinos with triple foam, how to wipe down tables at light speed, and how to smile even when a customer cursed over a wrong order. Every tip went straight into savings. My paycheck covered instant noodles and laundry soap. I never complained, not once. Because for the first time I was living my life. A life no one could take from me. A life no one could deny me. In August, I moved into the dorms at Evergreen. The room was small, the ceiling low, the mattress thin. But it was mine. My roommate Sarah saw that I had just one bag of clothes and an old body pillow. She didn't ask questions, she just said, "This fridge has 2 shelves, take one." I nearly cried. Not out of pity, but because of the simple kindness. I worked the evening shift at the campus library, shelving books, manning the reference desk, reminding students to lower their voices. It was quiet, steady, and no one asked why my parents never visited, or why my name wasn't on the list of freshmen whose families sent welcome gifts. One time the librarian, Mrs. Jenkins, handed me an envelope. "Someone sent this for you." I opened it. A blank white card with one familiar line. "Tomorrow's your birthday, are you still blowing out candles, Amelia?" No signature. But I knew who it was. My mother. After 8 years of forgetting, she suddenly remembered, right after I posted a picture of my new apartment. At the bottom of the card was the return address: Bahamas Resort, room 208. I never thought a single question, what about my share of Grandma's inheritance, could be enough to blow apart the roof of the house I'd called home for 18 years. The kitchen had gone dead silent after I asked it. My father looked up from his bourbon, eyes cold as a frozen lake. My mother leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, her gaze dark like she was sizing up a criminal. I repeated myself, this time louder, without the trembling. "You promised Grandma, in front of all of us, that the money would be used for both me and Noah's college. My father set his glass down with a sharp clink on the wood. Amelia, are you trying to lecture your own father? No, I'm reminding you of your promise, I said, fists clenched. The promise to Grandma. You said it would be split equally. He laughed, a short, dry sound full of nothing but contempt. You think your parents owe you explanations for every financial decision? You think you have the right to demand anything just because you share our last name? My mother cut in, voice sharp as a knife. You need to understand your place, Amelia. You got a scholarship. You don't need that money. Noah does. He needs all the support he can get to stay at Stanford. And the Bahamas trip? That part of Noah's education too? I shot back, my voice cracking under restraint. My father stood up. He didn't shout, but every word came out cold and precise, like a fine saw slicing through dry wood. I've indulged you too much, Amelia. This attitude, it's unacceptable. You're ungrateful and disrespectful. I'm not being disrespectful, I panted. I'm holding you to a promise you made to a dying woman. Enough, he said. His voice hit like the closing of a coffin lid. If you think this is so unfair, fine. You're 18. Start taking care of your own life. I was stunned. My mother didn't stop him. She walked into my room, pulled my old suitcase from under the bed, and threw it onto the mattress like she was returning an overdue loan. Pack up, be gone before sunrise. I stood there, frozen. You? You really want me to leave? Just because I reminded Dad of a promise? Because you don't know your place, she said, turning away without so much as a glance back. I was used to being ignored. Used to their coldness. But I never thought they'd cast me out like that. I packed in silence. A few clothes. The watch Grandma gave me. A notebook filled with half-written paragraphs. A photo of me and her from my 12th birthday, the last one with candles and cake. As I dragged my suitcase down the stairs, Mom sat in the living room staring at her phone. Dad stood by the door, like he was waiting to slam it the moment I stepped out. I looked at them one last time. Neither looked back. No one said goodbye. No one said, be careful out there. No one asked, where will you go? I left the house I once thought I belonged to, beneath the cold April night sky. That house wasn't home anymore. Maybe it never was. I rolled my suitcase down the street in silence. Didn't look back. Each step was heavy as stone, but light as wind, because I knew that from that moment on, I owed them nothing. Jenny met me at the door in an oversized hoodie, eyes red from staying up late. I know, she said, just from looking at my face. Don't say anything, just come in. She made me a cup of hot cocoa. I sat on her couch. My suitcase sat abandoned in the corner like physical proof of being thrown away. I don't even know where to begin, Jenny. Begin with you, not them. She held my hand. And this time, I'm staying. I nodded. A small flame flickered inside me. Not bright, not loud, but just enough to warm a heart that had just been pushed into the cold. I don't remember exactly how it felt, the first time I stepped into the Evergreen State University dorms. Just that my shoes squeaked on the old wooden floors, and my suitcase clicked behind me like a lonely echo. The dorm was about 100 square feet, with a bunk bed, a desk by the window, and a dented metal closet. No flowers. No family photos like the rooms next door. But it was the first space in my life where I had full control. My roommate Sarah was a sophomore in biotechnology. A brown-skinned girl with long curls and eyes that always seemed to know what you were thinking. When she saw I only had a small bag and 2 books, she didn't ask anything. She simply offered me half the fridge and shared her last packet of ramen that night. Kindness doesn't need explanation. Just timing. I started working my first week. Bean and Soul Cafe was a 10-minute walk from campus, narrow entrance, always buzzing with students and professors. I applied for the evening barista shift on popular hours, because it was busy, tiring, and required heavy cleanup. The interview lasted under 5 minutes. The manager, Carla, looked me over. worn-out shoes, faded backpack, eyes still hollow from a sleepless night. She only asked one question. "Can you handle pressure?" I answered without hesitation. "I don't have any other choice." And just like that, I was hired. The job at the cafe was far from glamorous. I learned how to make a latte in 3 minutes, wipe down a table in 10 seconds, and smile even when customers complained about not getting enough ice in their drink. One time, a student kicked the counter because the coffee machine was 2 minutes late. I still bowed and apologized, even though it felt like someone had punched me in the chest. Every night after my shift, I walked back to my room, with the smell of coffee clinging to my hair, and streaks of milk froth on my clothes. But I never once felt like I was wasting my life. Because every hour I worked was an hour I was no longer under anyone's control but my own. I divided my tips carefully. Half went into my savings account, and half I exchanged for cash and tucked into a small tin box in my drawer, for books, essentials, or days I might get sick. I studied like my life depended on it. Lecture halls became places where I could be heard without being judged. The library was my refuge when my mind swirled with memories of things my parents used to say. I took meticulous notes, recorded lectures, read ahead before class. I didn't study for grades, I studied to survive, so one day I could hold my head high without anyone's permission. Sarah often said I was the most intense person she'd ever met. "You don't study like a student, you study like someone fighting to reclaim something." I smiled. "I'm not trying to reclaim, I'm trying to rebuild. From scratch." Jenny remained my closest companion. She'd stop by on weekends, bringing pastries from her aunt's bakery, and silly stories about her classmates. Once she asked, "Do you think you'll ever forgive them?" I was silent for a long time. Then whispered, "Forgiveness is a choice, but forgetting isn't. I'll remember, so I'll never repeat it." One early winter evening, when the temperature had dropped below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, I received an email from the school notifying me I was at the top of the dean's list. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't dreaming. I stepped out of the library, stood under a bare maple tree, looked up at the sky, and took a deep breath. I was living the life they never believed I could. That new year I didn't go home. In fact, no one invited me. My mother sent one text on December 23rd. "If you're free you can stop by for dinner. But bring a salad, I'm busy." I didn't reply. Instead I stayed in the dorm, decorating it with Sarah using cheap LED lights and a paper Christmas tree. We watched comedies, drank hot cocoa, and laughed until our stomachs hurt. No one took a picture of a happy family. No trays full of traditional dishes. But there was peace, true peace, for the first time in years. No one ever asked how I survived those years. Maybe because people only care about the outcome, not the cuts on your hands from climbing to the top. But I remember every night shift at the library, eyes burning. I remember counting tip money down to the last cent to buy books and detergent. I remember curling up in the dorm at night, hugging my pillow without crying, because crying would make me tired, and I still had to study. And I remember the day I got called into Peterson Technologies. Mr. Peterson, a tall, silver-haired man, had once visited our school during a seminar. I was the only student who stood up and asked 3 pointed questions without a single tremble in my voice. He didn't say much that day, just nodded. But weeks later, I received an email from his company, inviting me to interview for a project assistant position. I walked into the office wearing my old shoes, polished to a shine, and my first suit, bought with the money I saved from the cafe and library shifts. The interview lasted exactly 18 minutes. The final question was, "Why do you think you deserve this opportunity?" I didn't hesitate. Because I've lived through what others only read about in books, and I never gave up. I started at the bottom, taking meeting notes, sending confirmation emails, managing my supervisor's schedule. But I learned faster than anyone who'd ever held that desk. Every system diagram, every data report, I printed, pinned to my wall, and memorized, like I once did with chemistry formulas at Evergreen. By year 1, I was promoted to project team lead. By year 2, I spearheaded an internal overhaul that saved the company over $1.2 million. By year 3, I sat across the table from people I used to serve coffee to. I didn't talk much about the past, but I carried it like a steel spine behind every decision. Every morning, I walked into meetings, set down my laptop, and looked into the eyes of anyone who ever doubted me. No one called me the intern girl anymore. They called me the problem solver. By age 27, I could say something I'd never dared to dream back when I stood outside Jenny's door that night. I stood on my own. No debt. No begging. No need to prove anything to anyone. That year, my birthday gift to myself was a 2-bedroom apartment on the 18th floor, with sliding glass doors overlooking the Central Park in downtown Tacoma. Walnut floors, marble countertops, pristine white walls, sunlight streaming in each morning like a gentle reminder. You made it, Amelia. I stood in the empty living room on signing day, barefoot on freshly mopped floors, holding the keys in my hand and smiled. Not a big bursting smile. Just a quiet one I had buried for 10 long years. That night, I posted one photo on social media. Me, standing in the empty room, holding the keys high. Golden sunset spilling in from the left. Caption: birthday gift to myself. No loans, no begging. Just the result of many days not giving up. 27. Amelia's new home. The post got hundreds of likes. Friends, co-workers, old acquaintances congratulated me. And then a few days later, my phone rang with a name I no longer saved in my contacts. Ma. I wasn't going to answer. But I did. Her voice was unexpectedly sweet. Amelia, I just saw your post. The apartment is beautiful, and it reminded me, your birthday's next week. I thought, maybe we should all get together. Just a small dinner. The whole family. If she'd said that 10 years ago, I might have cried from joy. Now, it made me laugh. Not bitterly, but with a cold clarity. Now I had value. Because I bought something they could no longer control. I replied simply, "Thanks, Mom. I'm busy," and hung up. That evening, Jenny and Sarah came over. No grand celebration. Just red wine, hot pizza and soft jazz under a string of fairy lights in the living room. Jenny raised her glass. To the birthday girl who got kicked to the curb. Look at her now. I clinked my glass with hers. Looked out the window, the city lights twinkling below. No one gave me anything. No one remembered my birthday out of obligation. But I had a home I built on my own. And that was the greatest gift I'd ever received. I used to imagine the day I'd return. Striding through that old doorway in a tailored suit, heels clicking like justice on tile. But when it finally came, I didn't need a show. Because what I carried with me wasn't revenge. It was the unflinching truth. It all began 3 days after the apartment post. Mom called, voice sugary sweet. "Belia, your dad and I saw your post. Absolutely stunning. The apartment looks so classy, and it reminded us, your birthday's coming up. How about a little dinner, just the family?" I didn't answer right away. I could hear the urgency in her tone, like she was afraid I'd hang up before she finished. The sudden love after nearly a decade of silence made me both laugh and ache. But I nodded. Not because I wanted to forgive, but because it was time for the truth to have an audience. I arrived at my family birthday dinner in an emerald green, minimalist dress and a pair of modest heels. I wore no jewelry, except for one silver watch. The last gift from my grandmother. The one thing that had followed me from that tiny childhood bedroom, through every battle since. My parents' house looked the same, peeling paint, an overgrown lawn, but the inside had changed. The dining table was lavishly set, fresh flowers arranged in vases, candles flickering. The smell of barbecue mixed with the artificial scent of forced reunion. My father greeted me at the door with a smile, as if he'd never hurled my suitcase at my feet, and said, "Get out of this house." "Look at you, my daughter, so successful." My mother came over, wrapped an arm around my shoulder, her strong perfume erasing any remaining space between us. You've really changed. We always knew you'd make something of yourself. I stayed silent. In the living room, I spotted Noah lounging on the couch, his belly outpacing his posture, with a pregnant blonde woman by his side. They didn't get up. They didn't greet me. I glanced around. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all present. Buzzing with murmurs. The Turner girl made it big, huh? We're so proud. Heard she bought some fancy apartment? I nodded lightly. Didn't deny it. But I hadn't come here for approval. I came to speak, one time, for good. Once everyone had taken their seats, my father stood and raised his glass. Today, our daughter Amelia turns 27. We're so proud of everything she's accomplished. Through hard times, this family always believed in her and prayed for her. My mother dabbed at imaginary tears. Family is the place you come back to, isn't it, sweetheart? I stood, pulled back my chair and walked to the center of the room. Thank you for the birthday wishes. But tonight, I have a few things to say. Things I haven't said in 9 years. Silence fell. Even the crackle of candles on the cake in the corner became eerily loud. I once left this house with a single old suitcase and not a dollar to my name, because I dared to remind you of a promise. A promise my father made in front of Grandma, that her inheritance would go toward college for both me and Noah. I looked directly at my father. That promise was broken. The money was spent on Noah's tuition and a family vacation to the Bahamas. Me? I was kicked out on my 18th birthday, no questions asked, no farewell hug. My mother stammered. Amaya, that was a long time ago. A long time ago? I cut her off, my voice sharp as steel. What about the years I spent crashing in spare rooms, working 3 jobs just to survive? The holidays I spent alone in a dorm because no one invited me home? The birthdays forgotten like they never mattered. Turned to the relatives. If anyone here was told I ran away with a boyfriend, lived recklessly, failed in life, please compare that story with the person standing in front of you now. No one spoke. Some exchanged glances. Others looked down. I turned back to my parents. I didn't come back to make peace. I came to close the chapter. And to make it clear. Silence is not agreement. And a family without kindness or truth is just an empty building. I turned around. Didn't look back. Didn't hug anyone. Didn't take a bite of cake. That night, my apartment glowed with string lights. Jenny, Sarah, a few close coworkers, and people who truly cared, gathered for a small celebration. We toasted with red wine and laughed at ridiculous jokes. I turned off my phone. Didn't care if they called. The next morning, I blocked all contact from my parents, Noah, and anyone who stood by and did nothing. I didn't need a showcase family. I needed truth, dignity, and a life I chose on my own. Amelia's story is undeniable proof that real success doesn't come from privilege or favoritism. It comes from resilience, relentless effort, and the courage to face the truth. Though she was cast aside, she didn't collapse. She used her pain to rebuild a new life. She didn't return seeking validation. She returned to declare that a person's worth isn't determined by the family they're born into, but by how they rise and rewrite their destiny. What do you think about Amelia's journey? What would you do in her shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family and life.